The dreams. The dreams.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me. Whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for joining me this morning. So this morning, as we're continuing our discussion of social media, we're going to talk about moving sort of into the next phase, right? So throughout the entire semester, we've been basically building up this idea of social community, social... what's the word that I want to look for? Social capital, if you will, sort of building up this relationship between our brand or ourselves and a larger community. And as we've kind of progressed along the way, we've added little bits and pieces to our knowledge base about how we interact with social media to help us attain our goals. And as a result, we've now gotten to this point where we're kind of getting at the place where we can kind of look back at how we've been doing, make judgments and assessments based on what we've been doing, and see if we need to change anything for going forward. And that's where social media analytics comes in. And so I've got a few slides here for social media analytics to talk about, and then I want to revisit something that we started last week, right? If you'll remember last week as we were going through this process, I said, we were talking about targeting an audience and we were doing various things. And one of the things that I did last week was a demonstration where I created a post and targeted it using Facebook's boosted post targeting system to an audience. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go back and we're going to look at the analytics of what we got from that post. And I was looking at them before starting class this morning, and I think they're very interesting. There's some really interesting data points that we can pull out of just this one small boosted post that was targeted at a particular demographic. So let's go ahead and get started today by just defining what we mean by social media analytics. So let's give ourselves a definition here. When we say social media analytics, what we're really talking about is the art and science. That's kind of key to note right there. The idea of analytics being an art and a science. We'll get back to that in just a second. The art and science of extracting valuable, hidden insights from vast amounts of semi-structured and unstructured social media data to enable informed and insightful decision-making. Right, so if we wanted to define social media analytics, that's how we do it. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to just take some time here and break this down so we can get some insights into what this really all means. And first, we're going to go back to that idea here of this being an art and a science. An art and a science. So science is pretty clear in terms of a definition, right? You use research, you draw conclusions based on research, you follow a scientific method, right? Form a hypothesis, conduct research, draw conclusions. And you have a well-defined process in order to be able to gain information. But art is not as well defined. Right? You may have heard some people say of art, I don't know art, but I know what I like. Right? Art is a more vague concept. Art is essentially what we're doing when we take resources that are given to us and apply them in such a way that something new comes about as a result. Right? So you can think about painting before someone starts to make a new painting or a new drawing, they have a set of raw materials. They have a canvas, paper, paint brushes, pencils, what have you, whatever media you need to create your art. And then they're able to apply that media in such a way that it creates something entirely new, something that did not exist before. And so that's what we're really talking about here when we're talking about reconciling the idea of art and science in social media analytics. Right? Because at its core, it is a science. Social media analytics is a science. We have a hypothesis, right? That's what we've sort of been developing up until this point, is we think our audience is this. We've done some research based on, just general sentiment that, has an understanding of, this group of people enjoys this type of content. And so we've decided that we're going to try to target our social media to that demographic. And that's our hypothesis for our social media analytics science. And then we test that hypothesis. So we start building posts and we start targeting posts to that audience. And then based on the results of that targeting, based on how many followers we gain, based on what the data shows on the back end of analytics platforms, based on a wide variety of things, we're able to get this insight from this semi-structured information. Right? So when we're talking about science here, we're talking about this semi-structured information. So we've got our hypothesis, we've tested it, and we've got some semi-structured information. And that semi-structured information lets us know whether or not we've been doing the right things based on our hypothesis. It lets us know whether or not our hypothesis is correct. And then art here is more related to our unstructured social media data. And to a degree, our semi-structured social media data. Right? But it's more this unstructured social media data. It's just the blob of paint that's on our palette, as it were. Right? And what we can divine from this data. Because data on its own is beneficial, it's helpful, right? We can do things with it. But there's still a process of making decisions based on that data, where somebody that really understands what's going on with the analytics and whether or not the science is being met, whether or not our hypothesis is bearing fruit, somebody who really understands it can take a little bit of data and get a big impact from it. And it's the way that you're applying what you've learned from this data into this insightful decision-making process. Making big changes, or maybe small changes, right, depending on the situation. Just in general, making changes toward the end of making things better or changing your hypothesis. Sometimes that's what's called for in science, right? Is not just that we change the experiment to meet the hypothesis, right? Even though in social media that's something that we can do, is we can kind of change our experiment, retarget what we're doing in order to try to make the hypothesis more true. But in science in general, what we're sort of tasked with is the idea if your hypothesis isn't verified, then you change the hypothesis. So maybe you were wrong at the beginning when you had this idea of what you thought your audience was. And that happens, right? That happens a lot. That happens to people in social media space and the design space all the time. And it oftentimes happens because they get a little too close to what they think is what they want. Right? We get a little too close, we get a little too attached to what we think is what we want, and we either end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we look at our data through a lens of bias, or we end up frustrated because the hypothesis doesn't bear fruit. It doesn't work out. So the idea here with analytics is that, it's important to work with these hypotheses, to keep an open mind, to, build our experiments and work with our social media posts and try to target them in such a way that it helps us to meet the audience. But then take that data that we get as a result and apply it in such a way that makes things better. And sometimes that might mean rethinking your hypothesis, rethinking who your audience is, rethinking all of this stuff to better serve what you want to serve, to better complete what you want to complete. And so you might be thinking, like, well, why would we look at analytics, right? Like, why would we worry about analytics? Why would we need analytics? I mean, we can look at follows, we can look at likes, and that should be enough, right? Well, not quite. Let's keep some stuff in perspective here. Right, and these are some old numbers, so I can only assume it's gone up since this point. Right, but that's 500 million tweets. That's a 500 million tweets that are sent daily. 95 million Instagram posts made daily. 400 hours of YouTube videos posted to YouTube every single minute. 400 hours a minute. Right, if we say that a feature-length film is between an hour and a half to 2 hours, that is somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 250 feature-length films posted to YouTube every minute. And get this number, 475 billion pieces of content are shared on Facebook every single day. So when you put that in perspective and you see all these enormous numbers, do you think you could keep up with that? You as an individual, do you think you could keep up with that? Do you think you could keep up with all the likes, all the shares? If you were in a competitive market, there's absolutely no way you'd be able to compete. You'd be able to keep up with every bit of data that you need to keep up with. It's just physically impossible. Right? If you were just growing a small account from, zero, and you didn't really care about what was going on around you, you could kind of stay siloed in your own lane. And that might be individually manageable. But when we look at things in the grand scheme of our platforms, there is absolutely no way that we can keep up with all of this. But you know who can keep up with it? The platforms. Twitter has the means in place, although I'm less confident about it now than I was a year or so ago. Twitter has the means in place to be able to keep track of all the tweets, all the likes, all the retweets. That's part of their business model. It's part of what keeps them afloat, gets advertisers. So they have the means to be able to keep track of all of that. Meta, Facebook, has the ability to keep track of the 95 million Instagram posts and 475 billion Facebook shares. They have that built in. Because again, that's part of their business model. That's what they do. Right? Part of the way they make money and sell advertising is based on how much content moves throughout their sites. So they have the ability to track this stuff and to have numbers and data that's associated with it. YouTube is able to keep the analytics for the 400 hours of videos posted to YouTube every minute because it's part of their business model. Their revenue sharing, they have to be able to keep up with it to be able to work with partnered channels. Every single platform, every single social media platform, regardless of what it is, has the ability to keep up with this data. They have the servers, they have the code analytics on the back end, they have everything they need because they need it. They need it for their own business purposes, and so they are able to pass that along to you, and then we get to take advantage of them as someone approaching it from our perspective. So while we can't keep track of all this on our own, we can with the help of the platforms. Which is why data transparency on social media sites becomes exceedingly important. Right? Because it is up to the platform in terms of whether they share this data with us or not. They can say no. But since it benefits them in the long run to be transparent with the data, especially on sites that do revenue sharing like Facebook Facebook does revenue sharing for certain accounts. Facebook and Twitch and YouTube. They want to make your analytics as transparent as possible. Because they're revenue sharing with you. And if you have a complaint, then you could take legal action against them. Because maybe what you're seeing and what they're saying doesn't add up. But then for all of these sites, on the flip side, if you look at their primary B2B business model, where the main thing that they're selling are advertisements that are directed toward the users of the platforms, they have to be able to know what kind of content is the most shared within a certain demographic and and how many hits or views or retweets or shares or whatever's happening with that content. They have to know what's happening with that content. Because when they're making these pitches to these companies to buy ads, then they're able to take this data and say, look at what we can do for your brand. Look at what we can do for your brand. Look at what we can do for you. We can get all of these eyes on your products, and that's why you should pay us whatever super high amount of money. right? So it's at the benefit of the platform to be able to share all of this data. So what do we do? If we can't keep up with all the metrics and crunch the data ourselves, we need to take advantage of what the platform gives us. So I've got some more reliable and less reliable ways of utilizing analytics that I want us to take some time and look at. The first one I want us to look at is a little less reliable, and it's called Social Blade. So Social Blade is probably the big sort of public site. The idea is that it integrates with the APIs for these different sites, and through its own algorithms comes up with different calculations for what these metrics mean on different platforms. And they utilize many different platforms to get data: YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, TikTok, whatever. And this is a good way to get data on profiles that would be competition. So even though the platforms provide good data analytics, they provide your analytics for you. They don't apply they don't give you all of your competition's analytics. So we kind of have to go through some backdoor channels to be able to get some information like that. And Social Blade is one of them. And since Social Blade is utilizing their own algorithms to kind of do calculations and figure things out like estimated revenue, then we can basically take everything that they post about with a grain of salt. But let's take and look at Social Blade here. Let me drag it over. Social Blade. So Social Blade's a website, socialblade.com. You can see we have a big search bar here on the homepage. You enter a username into that search bar, and it gives you related analytics. If we look at the supported platforms here, we can see all the platforms they support: YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok being the big ones. But that is basically the list of big ones. Right? So if we took somebody that we've talked about in the past, like let's say Mr. Beast, and typed that in, we can get some analytics. And so we get the Mr. Beast YouTube, we get the Mr. Beast TikTok, the Instagram, the Twitter, and a Twitch that seems different. Seems like it might not be related to the Mr. Beast. Maybe it's a Mr. Beast. But we get to see at a glance here, just how many, we get to see a subscriber count, we get to see a video view count, and we get to see an uploads count. And this is some information that you can get through, if you search around on a profile enough, you can find a lot of this information. There are browser plugins that do this as well, but, Social Blade lets me get that sort of information without having to install anything. And this is the sort of information that we can kind of see as being accurate, right? Because they're essentially just connecting with the platform API and pulling the data straight from YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. And so let's dive into the YouTube and TikTok here, but we can also see Instagram and Twitter is there as well. And these are the kind of YouTube stats that it gives us. And a lot of these stats, again, are based on Social Blade's own algorithms for determining different aspects, right? Like the total grade and the ranking and all that sort of stuff. That's a Social Blade thing that they're calculating. the estimated monthly earnings, I mean, we can see there, by those estimated earnings, we can see that just based on the numbers and how far apart they are, right? 227,000 to 3.6 million, that they don't really know. Right? They're just trying to make a guess. And sometimes, they can get close and sometimes not. There are sort of rules of thumb that you can use. That can kind of give you an idea. Right? So if it's a channel in good standing, one of the rules of thumb at least used to be, and I'm not sure if this is entirely still true or not, but you can think of it as $1 per 1,000 views. And so if we look at Mr. Beast's channel in particular here, and we see that in the last 30 days, he's received almost 1 billion views, just shy of 1 billion views. We could knock that off, and that would, if we went by that rule of thumb, that would basically say that for the last 30 days, just shy of $1 million worth of revenue. Which would put it roughly right in the middle of this estimated monthly earnings. So it's not a bad number. It's a good estimate, I would say, as a rule of thumb here. The data that we have up here at the top, the uploads, the subscribers, all that comes directly from YouTube. So that's easy stuff, right? The user summary and things of that nature. I mean, well, we're on the user summary page. The future projections and the detailed statistics, these are kind of interesting. I like these just to look at them because I find them interesting. Because it basically looks at the trends and says, well, if this individual stays with these trends, this is where they'll be in a month, this is where they'll be in 3 months, this is where they'll be in 5 months, a year, however long. And it just says, if we keep on these same projections as we're on right now, this is where they'll be. Now, this isn't exactly a good metric for that, or a good way to look at that, even though it does kind of give us a good baseline. But one of the things that we've discussed before in class is that follower counts and subscription counts and all that kind of stuff is logarithmic. Right? It follows a logarithmic curve. So as you get more, you'll be able to get more. Right? And if we look at these predictions here and we kind of put them in a graph on our minds, it's more of a steady incline instead of a logarithmic curve. We can see here, this month, the predictions for between May 31st and July 31st are roughly, 14 million subs. And if we go out and we look at the difference between, December 1st and October 1st of 2027, it's a little bit higher, right, than 14 million. It looks to be about 50 million. So they are giving you a bit of that logarithmic curve there that we've discussed. But it's, again, just sort of an estimate based on their understanding. If we can actually look at the graph here and see that it's more of a steady incline than an actual logarithmic curve, where if we were to sort of plot that out, it would probably look more like this, where we have more of a steady growth here and starting to pick up like that. Just because, the more you get, the more you're able to get. So I think that curve should be a little bit more dramatic there. Get the YouTube stats here. This kind of breaks it down to a daily level. And you can see different changes in video views and subscriber counts here on a day-to-day level. One of the interesting things you can also do here is get a live subscriber count, which is what you see like when they have like the weird YouTube videos that are a live subscriber count for an individual. They're just like on a page like this and just screen sharing and getting a live count. And since Mr. Beast's number is so high, then a live count is going to be pretty tough to do for them. But a lot of detailed information here. And so what I would want to do is, another thing that we could do here is there's this similar channels tab where they find similar channels based on a set of criteria that they've determined. And it usually has to do with the size of the channel. And so some of these might be relevant and some of them might not be particularly relevant to the exact type of content, but it is competition in a content market. And so this is another one of the good ways that, you can kind of have a look at this information. Now, you can also go from here and see what similar users, what other users that could be close by in the field would be able to do. So, for instance, if I were to look at Mr. Beast, look at him as an entertainment content creator, the ones that would probably be most similar would be the ones that are also in the entertainment content creator area, even if they're not doing the exact same type of content. They would be similar, and you could probably see a lot of overlap between subscribers on those channels. But what if we were to take Social Blade, and we'll just take a quick peek here at the TikTok summary just to show you that they've got the same sort of data for TikTok. But what if we were to take TikTok and we were to point it at a small channel, like my class streaming channel, Mr. Ramsey's Classes? What kind of data would we get out of that? And so, as I believe I've mentioned before, one of the things that I do with this YouTube channel is my goal is actually to counter what would be the best ideas for us to actually do to grow the channel. I want to keep the channel small. I want to keep it primarily to be just for you all, right? Those of you who are taking my classes here at the college. I primarily just want this channel to be for you, so I knowingly do things that are antithetical to having this channel grow. Like, my titles are kind of weird. I don't tag anything. I use the same thumbnail over and over and over again. Right? So I try not to have subscribers and have things grow. So if we look at a smaller channel, we can see it's found it here. Sees my video views, sees my uploads, sees my subs. And I can click it. Gives me a little grade. Gives me some estimated earnings, which I can tell you I don't make a cent off of the YouTube channel, so that's fine. I don't even have enough to be partnered. But it still has data even for me. It has data. And so if we look at my future projections, I've got some. Oh, if I keep working at this channel for 5 years, keep teaching these classes, maybe I can get up to 1,000 subs. That'd be pretty crazy. Pretty wild indeed. So even for smaller channels, it still gives you the analytics. Like, it's still pulling the data from the YouTube API. It's still running it through its algorithm. And it's still giving you the data. I wonder what they would say is a similar channel to this channel. I might be surprised. Yeah, that's all over the shop. They're just absolutely all over the shop. So that's probably not good for smaller channels, but just the data in general is good. And you can look at it through the lens of being able to check in on your competitors and seeing what they're doing. So that's good. So Social Blade gives us one option as a less than reliable way to get analytics for our social media, but what's a more reliable way to get analytics for our social media? Well, there's the platform analytics themselves. So each platform provides their own analytics. I want us to look at the Facebook analytics from what we did last week and the YouTube analytics just in general, just so we can see them, to see what kind of information that we get from these and maybe talk about what that stuff means. And so if we look, these are the results. These are the analytics, the results from that boosted post that I did last week. Right? If you'll remember back to last week, we got on the Cleveland Community College IT Facebook page. We created a post that was about returning student registration. We targeted it at individuals living in the Cleveland County area who said they were currently in college. And I can't quite remember all the different ways we've targeted it. But we got it to try to be in the area of what would be the Cleveland Community College student. Right, I think we said 2-year college and then in college, and had it in the Cleveland County area and the CCC service area. And then we gave it a $10 budget. We told it to run for 6 days. Right, which is, roughly like $1.65 a day worth of a budget. And we can see the results here. And we can see that for that $1.65 a day, if we look at the reach, that's that high level of that funnel that we've talked about previously. That's that awareness level of the funnel. That's the eyes in front of which this post got seen. It reached 1,379 people. As opposed to a regular post on this page, it might get in front of 20 people. Right? So we almost 13 times. Not quite 13 times, maybe 8 times. Or no, wait, yeah, math. It's real early. We did a lot more than that. We almost 80 times. Or 800 times. It's Friday. Cut me some slack. Do the math on your own. We almost 800 times what a normal post made on this page would see. Which is a decent return on investment. And And in this particular case, right, we don't really know how effective it is or was. Right, but we know that at least to some degree, we got some engagement on it because we can see that 13 people engaged with the post in some fashion. So we're starting to move down that funnel here. And now that's a dramatic, right? Like that's a dramatic move from 1,300 people who saw the ad to 13 people who did something about it, right? And so that's just a visualization, that's an actual visualization of that funnel that we've been talking about, right? Funnel gets smaller as it gets toward that loyalty end, as it gets toward that engagement end. So we might have a wide opening at the top with a lot of people coming in, but at the bottom, it's a really small opening that people are falling through. So we can see 1%, basically 1% of the people that saw our post actually did something with it. But when we think about it, and we see the cost per click here, right? This is where that art and science comes into play, right? Because it's how the art gets into how we're applying this data. When we look at our cost per link click, 83 cents per link click, right? We spent $10 on the boost. We got 12 link clicks, and the link click was to the registration page to give people information about how to register. And so when we think about that, where we were having them click a link to go off-site, to go somewhere else, that was basically our customer acquisition. So perhaps not all of them went through with the registration, but maybe 1% of them did, which would be 1 or 2 people. And so if 1 or 2 people actually went through and completed registration based on this, then the college in turn would have generated a profit. Now, the college didn't run the ad. I ran the ad. So the ad didn't cost the college anything to begin with. But if the college had ran this ad and they gained 1 re-registration that they would not have gotten otherwise, as a result, since the budget was in a range that left it wide open, right? It's a really, really low budget for something like this. It would have been worth it. They'd have made their investment back and then some. Right? Which is always ideal. And what I find interesting is how proportional these ad buys are and how you can even get a lower cost boost or advertisement to be proportionally more productive than another ad or post that you've spent much more on. I had a situation like that recently where, I was helping manage a page. Unbeknownst to one of the other people that managed the page, we both decided to run ads for a particular event. Right? I built out targeting. And I put a very small budget on it. I put an even smaller budget than this on it. I put an $8 budget on it to run for like a week, right? Just a little over $1 a day. And this person, since they were running the organization, with their ad, put $25 a day for 5 days on the ad. But they didn't narrow down and make the targeting quite as relevant, right? Bigger ad spend, so it's going to blast it out to more places and more people, and it's going to blast it out more in general. So you get that repeated awareness that we've talked about in the past. But as of the last time I checked, that had about 27 shares. And mine had about 8 shares. And you might be able to look at that on the surface and say, well, that's all right. The higher ad spend obviously got more, but break it down. Right? What's my return on investment? If I got 8 shares for $8, that's $1 a share. If you got 27 shares for $125, that's $3 plus a share. $3, $4 plus, almost $5 a share. So it might have hit a smaller audience, but the targeting put it in a better place in terms of a return on investment. At the end of the day, right, that's a lot of what we're looking for. Is this return on investment? And so we can see that in our analytics, and we can understand kind of how that works and what we can do with that. Another thing I thought was interesting about this is the audience that it tells me saw this ad. Because I was talking to the marketing team here at CCC a couple weeks ago, and they told me that our standard target demographic is an individual between the ages of 24 to 46 and often female. And even if we look at this microcosm here of data, that represents the exact same thing, right? We see the bulk of the people in our audience here are between the ages of 25 and 54. If we were able to massage these age ranges a little bit, I bet we could see it even closer. Right? By and large, female. 68% female, 31% male. We can see that reflexive in the data that we got. If we look at the placements here, that shows us where it put the boosted post, and you can see that the majority of it is in the mobile app. So the majority of the people saw this on mobile, which gives us the indication that a lot of our users that are using Facebook, or a lot of our potential students that are using Facebook, are using it primarily on the mobile app. So if we were to try to determine how we were going to organize things going forward, we'd want to think about mobile-friendly means of doing these things. Where were these people from? Well, we did the service area, right? We narrowed everything down. But some of the Cleveland Community College service area, just a teeny tiny sliver, if you remember back to last week, overlapped into South Carolina just a little bit. And we can see that reflected here as well, right? We can see that based on the targeting that we defined, the results that we got out of it just mirrors it 1-to-1. And we were able to get a decent return on our investment for this $10 boosted post. And so if we were to look at things like this in the future, we could say, we did a pretty good job targeting a good audience. This worked out. Go in this direction maybe in the future. Maybe do a little bit of video with it since, we're looking at a more mobile crowd. Maybe try the Reels or something else of that nature to try to serve the mobile audience and go from there. And so that's Facebook. The other one I want to show you is YouTube, and this is my Mr. Ramsey's Classes backend here on YouTube, which is something I don't show a lot, but I do want to show the analytics here. And we can see a lot of good information on the analytics page here. One of the things that I really like about this graph is that it shows you views and watch time in relation to when videos were posted. So you can see how many you got off of a new video being posted versus how many you got off of just in between times. How many people find your video in between postings and watch it. And in general, we typically see spikes on postings on YouTube channels, but in this case, it's flip-flopped. And that's primarily because I do primarily live streams and save the VODs for this channel. So not a lot of people have a lot of time to watch these typical hour-long class sessions when they're going live, but they'll come back and watch them later, right? And so that's what we see here. We see this live stream happened here, and then there was another spike here a few days later. Live stream happened here, spike the next day, spike. And we did get a spike here on this day when this live stream happened. Well, we can typically see spikes a couple days later after a live stream because it's people who are catching up, people who didn't have the opportunity to watch it live but coming back and watching it later. Down here below this, we see the top content in general. University students have found the videos that I made for my design class about the book, The Design of Everyday Things, and those are the biggest videos, I think, on my channel. At this point are these Design of Everyday Things chapter summaries, which are pretty cool. If I change my date range here to lifetime, you can see that the top 5 videos are all Design of Everyday Things videos. Then there's a random PHP live class in here, and then another Design of Everyday Things, a random Getting Started intro live class in here, and the Design of Everyday Things. Right, if we click view more there, we can actually get a ton of data and analytics for our videos over time. Let's see. Let's see if we can find the highest non-live stream, non-design of everyday things video. Components of effective email, I guess it would be. Right here, 43 views. Although other things have better view counts, so. Maintaining ethical social media communities. You'll get that in a couple weeks. That'll be fine. But it's good analytics, and we can see how videos do or have done compared to one another, and it's really great. I encourage you all just to kind of go into the back ends of your channels, poke around, try to figure things out, learn things about the content that you've been creating, and in turn, apply this data to what you do going forward to make smart decisions. And so that's all that I have for you for today. We'll stop here. I think that's plenty. We've almost reached the hour mark. If anybody's here with me live this morning, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. If you're watching the recording or you think of questions later, you can send them to me via email or Teams. But that's going to be all that I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.